In today's video, I mix two-component epoxy putty, make antenna wire from plastic sprue, I cut part into two pieces. Also, I glue tantrack link and apply minor weathering. Hello fellow modelers! After creating some challenging aircraft models, I am looking to switch a gear and work on something a bit more straightforward. Vespid tanks in 7:2 scale are always a solid choice. I've picked up this beautiful British Comet Mk.I. The kit is packaged with a plastic parts that features fantastic details, including soft weld lines and impressive tantracks, not to mention the finely crafted bolts and tiny rivets. But there is even more. The box also includes metal gun barrel and tiny photo etch pieces. Okay, let's start with assembling. With so many small parts, I need to be extra cautious to avoid losing any of them. To tidy up the residual plastic from the sprue, you can use extra glue that works as a solvent for smoothing things out. The drive wheel features a mold runner embedded in the teeth. If you have a sharp side cutter on hand, carefully trim it away and use hobby knife to clean up any leftover plastic. If not, it is advisable to stick just with a sharp blade and soft sandpaper. The wheels have raised ejector pin marks. Taking the time to remove this will ensure perfect fit. I noticed that the drive wheel has an issue with the fitting. The connection pin is simply too large. It is useful to deepen the hole in the both parts to resolve this issue. Now the wheel is centered. If you do not correct the position, you might run into problems with a track length fitting. There are more ejector pin marks on the fenders. You can remove only the raised one because the rest will be hardly visible. However, I clean them all with a sandpaper. The holes for gun barrels are indicated, but are too shallow. So, I use a hypodermic needle as an accurate drill bit. I am removing plastic connection pin, which allows me to place the machine gun at angle. I really appreciate the details, like open driver's visor. The right light was different from the left and was not equipped with a lampshade. Removing the mold runner is tricky due to presence of track details and connection pins nearby. In the past, I painted the links, wheels and model separately, but this approach wasn't ideal since the glue struggled to stick to the painted parts, leading to weak joints. I have since discovered that assembling all the parts before painting offers a more reliable and ultimately enjoyable experience. The tantracks are designed for easy assembly, featuring a long straight section made from a single piece, while the curved parts on the drive wheel consist of separate lengths. In total there are 18 components in the section. For attaching small parts with intricate details, I find that the extra thin glue works perfectly. It requires just a tiny amount and it evaporates quickly, making the result much cleaner. I sometimes have a problem that the last link has too large gap, but this design seems foolproof. On the turret are wires for smoke launchers, but these were installed on the late Mk2 version. And you should also drill holes for lifting eyes. All of these details are carefully laid out in the manual, so you wouldn't have to waste the time searching for references elsewhere. To open commander hatch, cut the part in half. The engine section has many handles. I know that it is a little bit overkill for a scale, but I would like to make them more like handles with the holes. I meticulously cut out the plastic handles with a sharp blade. Honestly, I struggled to make 20 identical tiny handles from wire, so I decided to design 3D parts and print them. And the printable files are available for my Patreons or on Cal3D for free. The main issue I want to highlight is the lack of a mantlet cover, which is characteristic of the Mk.I version. I am not skilled with sculpting, especially at this small scale, but I am determined to give it a shot. For this project I am using 2-part epoxy putty from Damek, which is more flexible and less sticky, compared to the Alteco epoxy putty I normally work with. I find that by using a bit of water helps me to roll out the putty into the thin layer. It is helpful to make the layer slightly larger when needed. The residual putty can be easily cut away with a scissors or hobby knife. First, I use the sculpting tool with a small ball, but I found out that the ordinary toothpick works the best for me. On the sides should be large circles. This handy puncher tool allows you to create circles ranging from 0.5 to 2 mm. I should have removed the connection pin from the inside the hull, now it prevents proper fitting. Now I must fill the pronounced seam line with a putty for plastic. The model has nice details, but you can add oxy-fuel torch texture on many armor plates. For the scale you need only sharp plate and make many cuts into the plastic. I have photo documentation from the Bovington Tank Museum and Duxford Museum in UK, where the Comet is displayed. You can clearly see the rough metal texture on the turret, which can be easily replicated with a Tamiya putty. Just smooth it out and dilute it with a leveling thinner. Then apply this mix with a brush on the surface. I recommend opting for cheap synthetic brush, since this technique can wear down your brush quickly. While going over references, I spotted a prominent red line on the turret. Again, I turned to epoxy putty and using a toothpick for texture. I also noticed a small reinforcement rip on the exhaust deflector, which I replicate using a styrene profile. And don't forget about the spare tank holders and support that add a further authenticity. Before applying primer and paint, it's handy to clean the surface of isopropyl alcohol, primarily on the metal parts. First I use a grey primer, which I like the most for revealing imperfections and dust particles. This obsession comes from car and aircraft models. The primer brought out some scratches on the mantlet cover, so I opt to use a less diluted primer to smooth the surface out once more. I like to use a black primer for the small tanks, because it will make the whole painting process more straightforward. If you happen to miss a deep corner of a chassis with a paint, it will still be black, which is far better than having it grey. For late British armour vehicles, there is a standard camouflage color known as SCC-15. I have an accurate shade from AK, but after applying shading and weathering, the color will inevitably change, so you do not need the exact shade at all. It's handy to change the shade to lighter hue for rescale, therefore I'm spraying relatively strong highlights of a mix of SCC-15 and beige. One advantage of using durable black primer is that you can easily remove acrylic paint with alcohol, which is better than applying another layer. I enjoy using acrylic paints like Vallejo, Citadel or Revel Aqua. They can be diluted with water and have a good coverage. These paints are ideal for layering and shading, because they dry quickly and once dry they cannot be reactivated with water. This is just a basic shading for now, as I plan to enhance it later when I have solidified my vision for the model outcome. If you dampen the surface slightly with the water, you can effortlessly blend the acrylic paint, achieving a smooth effect reminiscent of oil paints. One of the main advantages of acrylic paint is its quick drying time, usually only a few minutes, and the fact that it cannot be reactivated with a thinner once dried. In contrast, if you make any significant mistake with oil paint, you can easily wipe it away or fix it with a thinner. When working with acrylics, any errors typically require repainting the entire section. For that reason, I prefer using this technique mainly for small models. the surface painted with the airbrush appears uniform. Therefore I'm creating small dots of paint and blurring them to achieve a distressed effect. The kit has a few waterslide decals. I recommend applying a light coat of a clear varnish. There is no need to cover the whole model, just focus on the areas under the decals. Handy is to apply Decals chemicals, which help to copy the model's surface and set them correctly. Once the decals have dried, I unify them with a matte varnish. The kit also includes tiny metal parts that need to be bent into the right shape. To achieve a deep shading and highlight the details, I apply a black enamel wash. While it might appear a bit cartoonish at this moment, I'm confident that the weathering process will improve its overall look. I am applying some random stains and sketches using a light green shade and a sponge. To add more details, I'm also using a paintbrush to create additional sketches for variety. It's time to dirty up the model. The wheels and chassis typically gather a lot of mud and dust, and the great technique for the scale is using a dry pigment. Although it might seem like there is a lot of pigment applied, once I add a pigment fixer it will appear less fluffy. The pigment fixer acts as a binder, allowing the pigment to stick to the surface. This means it won't just wipe off with a light touch. Then I make many small splatters with enamel paint. You can notice that it will make a lot of mess, but it is not a problem because you can smooth or wipe out large dots with enamel thinner. With the same paint, you can make accumulated dust or leaks on the turret. I don't like dark shading, so I smooth it out with a heavily diluted yellow-brown paint. Don't forget to paint accumulated mud and dust on the thumb tracks and armor plates, even it will be a hidden detail. The graphite powder nicely highlights the bare metal texture. The UV clear resin is ideal for creating glass covers, as it cures just in a few seconds. I really enjoy this traditional method for making thin antenna wires. I take an old plastic string, heat it up with a lighter, and stretch it into the fine line. Recently I got this incredible sharp tweezers from Annie's model, and it has quickly become my favorite tool. I am planning to create a diorama for this model, so I decided to include both tank commander and driver figure. I start by spraying a base coat of black and white paints, which helps to create artificial shading and aids in the painting process. I usually apply a highly diluted layer of acrylic paint, but it tends to reveal the printing layers. To counter this, I am applying a thicker, denser layer of paint to smooth out the surface. I have also painted the second driver figure, but only the head is noticeable. I am currently fine-tuning the shading of the canvas. I have some mixed feelings about the outcome, so I've decided to revisit the whole model and give it extra attention. I think it needs lighter, accumulated dust and shading. This will be final layer, allowing me to apply enamel paint more freely. I really enjoy using enamel paint for the dust effect, because it dries quickly and achieves a lovely matte finish. Plus, it is easy to wipe off or blend it with an enamel thinner, which helps to create a smooth transition. I am applying dust around the edges and raise details, where dust typically settles. The final touch will involve editing some stains with the oil paints, as the dust has made the surface a bit too bright. Dear friends of tracks, mud and British engineering, this British beast with a 77mm gun was the answer to the question: what if we did the Cromwell, but you know better? The Vespid kit is lovely, while I would have appreciated the mantlet cover, but I'm quite satisfied with the result, even if I'm not the best at sculpting. I hope you enjoyed this miniature, and I think it would be well suited for a small diorama. Okay, thank you all for watching, and heartfelt thanks to my Patreons for their support. See you next time!